headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. We are going to be diving in to our entire wide receiver start and sit episode here in just a moment. We've got a lot of buys this week. A lot of really crucial players going to be missing time right now due to the buys. So you are going to be looking for some guys to help round out your roster and get you that big old sweet fantasy dub this week. So make sure you're paying attention. Make sure you hit that like button for us. But if you want to win something, I've got something to give away to all of you today. That is right. I've got an autographed Stefon Diggs football that I want to give away in this episode. Only two things that you need to do to be entered to win it, though. Number one, you got to head over to pristineauction.com and sign up there using code word headliners. Get yourself a $10 voucher when you sign up, so when you make your first purchase, you automatically get $10 off of it. And trust me, you're going to want to buy something. Too many cool things not to. And number two, you got to leave a comment down below in this video and tell me why you believe that ball is going to look best in your house. But like I said, lots of guys missing this week because of buys. So we really need to dig deep and find some people that are going to help us out. Let's kick it off on Thursday Night Football. We already know Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, they are going to be missing this week. Arizona allows the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Chris Olave has cleared the concussion protocol, which is great to see. He is still going to be a high-risk start for me this week, knowing that this is a tougher matchup, but also knowing that he's going to get a majority of the targets. So yes, it is high risk. Ceiling is going to be there. We just know the floor is going to, unfortunately, be a little bit lower than what we would like. So for those of you out there that are really, really grinding right now, deeper leagues, don't have anybody to even think about starting, another guy that you could take a shot at would be New Orleans Saints. Traquan Smith scored a touchdown last week. I've always been a Smith fan. He's going to have an opportunity to be the wide receiver 2 this week. For the Arizona Cardinals, New Orleans allows the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And as of recent, they've been torched by the names of Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase. All pretty good talents, right? Well, I think we're going to see Rondale Moore breakout week this week. Yes, Robbie Anderson, newly acquired, is going to be there. I'm not banking on him making any type of an impact in his first week with the team, especially given that it's a short week. But number two, I just don't buy into any type of the Robbie Anderson hype right now. He's had like one good stretch of games in his entire career. He's had a couple thousand-yard season, whatever it may be. He's been okay, but he's never been a reliable type of guy that we can use in fantasy football. Now, on the screen, you might see DeAndre Hopkins is listed as a sit. I can't put him as a start because there's not enough numbers to put in here to make him a start. He's a start for me, though. Now, I would tell you all, because you've been waiting on him, you're going to put him in your lineup, but do not expect wide receiver 1 numbers, and I wouldn't even expect high wide receiver 2 numbers. This is a good matchup for him. However, with him being back first week, I'm just going to say probably expect low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, just to play it safe, not set ourselves up for failure with him. And then Rondale Moore, he's the big play guy in this offense for me. I think it is Rondale Moore breakout week. I am really looking forward to watching this guy this week, and I think he is going to be fantasy viable for sure. Cleveland and Baltimore will renew their rivalry this week, and the only guy I've got listed as a start in this matchup is going to be my boy Amari Cooper. Baltimore allows the 5th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I'm going to take Amari Cooper here. 4 games with double-digit targets, 12 targets in the last 2 games, 24 overall combined. The dude's getting peppered with targets right now, and he's making something of it. 4 touchdowns on the season as well. Absolutely love what Amari Cooper is doing in this offense right now. And honestly, yes, there might be a little bit of a downward trend when Deshaun Watson gets back, just because we need to kind of let them work together a little bit. But then we're right back up for the fantasy playoffs. On the Baltimore side, Rashad Bateman, we don't even know if he's going to be able to start this week or not. They did bring in Deshaun Jackson, which we'll keep an eye on. But to me, not really fantasy viable at this point in time. The Dude has seen his production First couple of weeks, boom, down, gone. Production-wise, down to a 1. His volume score has always been a 0 because he doesn't get enough volume. For me, I think we really got to just step back from starting the Duve and just realize that maybe it was just a hot start to the season. He'll have some stretches like that, but as far as being fantasy reliable goes, not going to happen. Tampa Bay and Carolina currently allows the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers, which is great. But Pittsburgh allows the most, and look at what Tampa Bay did against them last week. Absolutely nothing. I dropped the X factor on Mike Evans just a little bit. Godwin being back is kind of shifted to what we've seen in the past, where Mike Evans not seeing as much volume as we would like, and we see that with his volume score dropping to a 3 this week. Chris Godwin getting a little bit more of that volume, but we know Mike Evans is going to be the big play guy, is going to have touchdown upside over Chris Godwin. Both of these guys will be starts again this week, and what could end up being a little bit of a tougher matchup than we saw last week. But hopefully they figure something out over the week here and they get themselves going against Carolina. And for the Carolina Panthers, if your name isn't Christian McCaffrey, your butt's not seeing my lineup. Atlanta and Cincinnati. Atlanta coming off that big win last week. Can they keep it going against Cincinnati, though? The Cincinnati defense is a tough matchup, especially when it's against a team like the Atlanta Falcons that are very inconsistent in their passing game. Last week really got it done on the ground and with their defense. Other than that, you're just not seeing that upside in the passing game because there's just no consistency with it, unfortunately. Kyle Pitts was able to score, but that was basically it. Drake London, his targets and productions are dropping a little bit right now. Going up against Cincinnati, it's going to be tough for them. They're both sits for me. As far as Cincinnati goes, though, Chase and Higgins are both going to be starts for me. T. Higgins saw 10 targets last week, which was absolutely great. Good to see him back out on the field. Didn't have a whole lot production-wise, but going up against Atlanta that gives up the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, I think Chase and Higgins should be ready for big games here. Hopefully, Higgins is fully healthy, because if he is, both of these guys are going to be super reliable this week. Detroit at Dallas, and for the Detroit Lions, a full week off lets them really prepare for Dallas, lets them get a game plan in place to hopefully get that offense rolling again. The last time we saw them against New England, it wasn't pretty. But Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds are both going to be starts for me this week. The offense as a whole should end up being more healthy. We get DeAndre Swift back, which really kind of brings that underneath passing game back, which was a strength to begin the season, and it's going to open things in the middle and deep for this team. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown on the volume part is going to be our safest bet here. Hopefully, he's feeling 100% now. Josh Reynolds, a little bit more big play dependent, but going up against Dallas, I got both of these guys as starts. CeeDee Lamb is going to be the only start as of me right now for Dallas. Now, Detroit allows the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. If Dak Prescott were to be cleared to play this week for some reason, then I'm also going to go with Michael Gallup. CeeDee Lamb is a start regardless of who plays. But if Dak ends up going, I think the big play upside is going to be there. That will benefit Michael Gallup, and we could see a big touchdown from him. New York and Jacksonville could end up being a really sloppy matchup. The New York Giants offensive line right now, is it going to hold up against that Jacksonville pass rush? That's going to be my number one question for this week. Now, Jacksonville did get trashed by Indianapolis last week, threw all over them, but I'm still not going to be able to trust Richie James, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. Unfortunately, just given the ups and downs we've seen that offense, the New York Giants are playing great. Me saying that their offense isn't great has no indication on how the team is playing as a whole. The one thing they're doing right now is they're winning with their defense, and they're running the football, and they're being tough-nosed on the ground. That's always going to be a recipe for success, especially at the beginning of a season. Now, as the season wears on and they find themselves in some matchups where they're probably going to have to throw a little bit more, is Daniel Jones going to be able to step up to the plate and do that? In those matchups, maybe one of these guys become a start. But in this matchup against Jacksonville, I don't know if I can trust that. And for the New York Giants, like I just mentioned with their defense a second ago, it's number one in the league in terms of fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Kirk is going to be a low-end, high-risk start for me. His volume has been trending down a little bit. He's been a little bit touchdown dependent. Those have been keeping him propped up. This is too tough of a matchup for me to be super reliant on him, though. So just know that the ceiling is going to be lower. Indianapolis and Tennessee, and as I mentioned a second ago, Indianapolis shredded Jacksonville last week, and now they get Tennessee that allows the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. Go ahead. Go ahead and throw Michael Pittman in your lineup. Big bounce back for him last week. I told you all not to be off the Michael Pittman train. Hopefully you all listened, because if you did, you got a big week last week. And I also told you with Alec Pierce that when the matchup showed up, he would be a start for me. The matchup's here. He's absolutely going to be a start for me. I know Paris Campbell had a huge week last week, but Alec Pierce is still that number 2 in this offense to me right now. For the Tennessee Titans, I don't know what you want me to do here. We've got Robert Woods, and we really got nobody else that I even wanted to list. You could list a Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. You could list a, Kyle Phillips, but does it really matter? Indianapolis also allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game. So if you're looking to Tennessee for a start, you probably don't even need to set a lineup this week. Green Bay at Washington has the makings of a really fun offensive day for the Packers. I mean, Washington allows the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and they're coming off a pretty disgusting loss against the New York Jets where their offense completely stalled out. Lazard and the Doobs could both have huge weeks this week against Washington after disappointing weeks last week. I'm looking for a huge bounce back here. Lazard is going to be very touchdown dependent for me, as we've kind of seen already. But he's still got that connection right there with Aaron Rodgers. And in this matchup where Dobbs might have a little bit more volume, Lazard is still going to have some big play upside. And that's why he's going to be my prize picks prop to play. I'm going to take the over on Allen Lazard this week. 50.5 receiving yards. I'm going to take the over there going up against Washington. And then for the Washington Commanders, Green Bay allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Not nearly as a fun matchup for them, but looks like they might have a backup quarterback. I don't know for sure. As of this recording, I have no idea who's going to start for Washington yet this week. Samuel may be the only one that I trust here. He's coming off a really bad week, so I understand why a lot of you would be hesitant to even play him. That's why he is a high-risk start for me, only getting a score of 15. But again, we have a lot of guys on buys this week, so you might not have a choice, and you have to go with Samuel. New York Jets and Denver's defense is really no joke, and I think we saw that on Monday Night Football against the Chargers. This matchup, it should be full of starts. Wilson, Davis, Moore, Sutton, Judy. Like, we should be starting as many people as we can in this matchup. There's a whole lot of red that you see on the screen right now. Broncos allow the 2nd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. These 3 wide receivers right now, none of them are stepping out as being like a guy that we can fully trust in fantasy. Garrett Wilson ceiling his collapse. Davis isn't as safe as he was. Elijah Moore hasn't done anything this year, and he's coming off a 0-target performance. And then on the flip side for the Broncos, I mean, the Jets have been really good against the pass this season. And then after watching this offense last week again with a banged-up Russell Wilson, I just can't trust what's going to happen with them. Yes, Cortland Sutton is going to be a start for me. Yes, he's a high-risk start as well. Who's going to see Sauce Gardner? Probably going to be Sutton if he sticks to the outside the entire time. If he doesn't and Judy's outside the entire time as well, then I think Judy might see a little bit more Sauce. But again, I don't know for sure at this point. So right now is just a high-risk start for me. Houston and Las Vegas. And for Houston, I beg of you, can we get Brandon Cooks in the end zone, please? That's all he needs. He just needs to score. Top 24 in targets per game, but scoring is the biggest issue. There is no offensive production from Brandon Cooks, even though he's getting all the volume. And for Las Vegas, Adams is really the only guy that I can trust in Las Vegas right now. I believe this could end up being Darren Waller week as well. So that kind of take out Matt Collins and Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow, obviously, the last time we saw him, he was taking out his own guy at the end of a game. We'll see what happens with him this week and if he can start kind of getting back to some of that 2021 form we saw. But for right now, Devontae Adams is really the only guy we're going with. Seattle and the Los Angeles Chargers, and inconsistencies are always going to show themselves with Tyler Lockett. And it's very frustrating to own him at times because he's going to go out and give you 5 or 6 fantasy points. And then other weeks, he's going to go get you 30 or 35 fantasy points, and you're going to be like, the only reason I won this week was because of Tyler Lockett. Metcalf is going to see a little bit more volume than him right now. But again, that upside of Lockett gives him just a little bit more production. But going up against the Chargers, we're going to list them both as starts. Seattle allows the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, but I'm still going to go with Mike Williams as a high-risk start this week, exactly like last week. Remember, I talked about it, that if you were going to play Mike Williams, he was kind of a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 2 for me. I didn't like the matchup. Patrick Surtain could take him out, and that's exactly what happened. The same thing could hold true this week. Now, I do think his ceiling is a little bit higher this week because, yes, Seattle has played well, but they're not Denver in terms of what they have from an athletic and ability standpoint. So I still think Seattle is a very good defense so far against the pass, but Williams will still be a high-risk start for me. Still going to keep an eye on Keenan Allen. He's getting closer and closer. I don't know if he ends up making it back this week. Can't really start Palmer, though. He had 12 targets last week, but only ended up having 57 yards. He's a very, very high-risk start right now. There just hasn't been a whole lot of ceiling with him. Casey in San Francisco, I thought we were going to be able to go back to Juju this week after a great performance from him last week, but San Francisco allows the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, so I'm going to take another week on Juju. I've got him at a 14, so he's just barely a fringe sit for me as of right now. But given the matchup, even with the big week last week, I'm going to give it another week to see what he does. For Debo and Ayuk, Kansas City allows the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. I'm really hoping that we see them attacking the defense with the pass the same way we did last week. Brandon Ayuk had a huge bounce-back performance last week. Hopefully we can catapult that into better performances throughout the rest of the season. He's up into the wide receiver 2 status now and needs to be locked into our lineup, especially given a matchup like this. Pittsburgh and Miami is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. If you're looking for any type of gift idea, stocking stuffers, head over to manscaped.com. Use code word headliners at checkout. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. Utilize that this holiday season. Deontay Johnson will continue to be a start just because he's top 12 in targets per game. The targets continue to come his way, even if he doesn't do anything with it, unfortunately. Miami allows the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers. This is a good matchup, but I don't even know who the quarterback is going to be at this point. Kenny Pickett has been cleared to practice, still technically in the concussion protocol. Will it be Mitchie Biscuits instead? And then don't forget that last week when we saw a great performance from Chase Claypool, there was no Pat Freiermuth. As of this recording, he's been cleared and he's back at practice and he's going to be good to go this Sunday. And because of that, we're going to have to be very careful with the other 2 wide receivers because they're just not seeing the same type of volume that Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth are. And then for Miami, I mean, come on. Pittsburgh still allows the most fantasy points to wide receiver. Yes, they did shut down Tampa Bay last week, but Tua is going to be back this week. Waddle's coming off a huge performance. Hill's coming off a huge performance. Speaking of Tyreek Hill, he has just as many 10 reception, 150-yard receiving games this year as the entire NFL combined. And the Chicago-New England matchup just sucks. Okay, I'll give you a little bit more than that. I mean, this has all the makings of an absolutely awful game. Yes, we've seen Chicago try to throw it a little bit more over the past couple of weeks. New England's defense is playing very, very well right now. And on the flip side, Chicago's defense allows the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Some of that is because teams are able to run it against them a little bit more because they know that they can't just strike as quickly as some other offenses. This is going to be a tough matchup for me. Jacoby Myers will still be a start, more of a wide receiver 3 option. And for those of you asking, yes, Tyquan Thornton has been thrown on here. I will list him going forward as of right now, but he's not quite fantasy relevant, even though we had a big week last week. And that's going to wrap it up for week 7. Hopefully y'all appreciated the video. Don't forget to head over to Pristine Auction to sign up and get in the running for this autographed Stefon Diggs football. Make sure y'all hit the like button for me on the way out. Subscribe if you're new here to the channel. And as always, leave me any comments down below with questions that you may have. Hopefully everybody has a great rest of your week. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.